Since we were little, we are taught to see intelligence as a gift, an advantage that will open doors for us and ensure a bright future. But what if that belief is mistaken? What if, in reality, being intelligent is a burden, a curse disguised as privilege? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most provocative philosophers in history, believed exactly that. He argued that the more intelligent a person is, the more they suffer, not because the world is difficult, but because their mind does not allow them to live in the comfortable ignorance that so many enjoy. Think about the last time you noticed something others did not. Perhaps it was a subtle injustice, a contradiction in someone's discourse, or the hidden hypocrisy in a social system. Now, imagine living every day with that hyper-awareness. For Schopenhauer, this was the true dilemma of the intelligent. They see too much, feel too deeply, understand too profoundly, and that distances them from the naive pleasure of everyday life. The problem is not simply intelligence itself, but what it reveals. The more you understand about the world, the harder it becomes to accept it. The futility of human ambitions, the inevitability of suffering, the transience of happiness. These are harsh truths that most ignore, but that the analytical mind cannot help but confront. Being intelligent means having to deal with these realities on a daily basis, and that comes at a high cost. Society admires intelligence, but only up to a point. The brilliant student is celebrated, the revolutionary genius is revered. But the thinker who questions the illusions that support the world, that person is usually ignored, ridiculed, or even rejected. Intelligence, therefore, can become a barrier, an element of separation between the individual and the rest of society. Schopenhauer saw this as a paradox. While ignorance allows most people to find happiness in mundane routines and ephemeral desires, intelligence often leads to disenchantment and isolation. Does this mean that intelligent people are doomed to suffer? Not necessarily. But to understand how to escape this trap, we must first grasp the true nature of this curse. And here, new videos are released every day to help you on your journey. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any. The curse of deep thought. Arthur Schopenhauer lived in a world that idolized progress and reason, yet he refused to accept the optimistic narrative of his time. While other philosophers saw intelligence as the pinnacle of human existence, he regarded it as a double-edged sword. The more one thinks, the more one suffers. For him, intelligence was not a ladder to happiness, but rather an abyss leading to melancholy. According to Schopenhauer, the pain of intelligence comes from its ability to see the raw truth of life, the illusions that make everyday life bearable, romantic love as something eternal, success as synonymous with happiness, justice as a given. Collapse under the scrutiny of critical thought. The result? A profound sense of emptiness and disillusionment. The German philosopher also pointed out that most people live under a veil of voluntary ignorance. They accept simplistic narratives because these narratives bring comfort. But the extremely intelligent individual does not have that option. They see the invisible threads that move the world, understand the traps of human desire, and therefore feel out of place. This displacement can be social, but it is also internal. The restless mind never finds rest. Deep thought can lead to fascinating reflections, but also to sleepless nights filled with questions about the meaning of existence. Intelligence transforms every trivial detail into a philosophical dilemma, making it difficult to simply be, without analyzing or dissecting every experience. However, Schopenhauer did not believe that intelligence was a condemnation without escape. On the contrary, he sought ways to minimize its weight and find some peace. But for that, one had to abandon a fundamental belief, the idea that intelligence by itself could bring happiness. Why the more you know, the less happy you are. Imagine that your mind is like a spotlight. The stronger the light, the more details you see, but also the more imperfections and shadows emerge. The happiness of ignorance lies in the fact that a dim light does not allow one to see all the cracks in reality. For Schopenhauer, the tragedy of intelligence is that it illuminates too much. Intelligence not only amplifies the perception of suffering, but also intensifies awareness of its inevitability. Life is a dance between pleasure and pain, but those who see too much realize that pain is the rule and pleasure the exception. That is why many extremely intelligent people feel a persistent kind of anguish, a sense that something is always missing. Furthermore, Schopenhauer argued that intelligence creates the illusory expectation that knowledge can lead to happiness. Many believe that if they understand the world better, they will be able to navigate it with greater ease. But what happens in practice? The more you understand, the more you perceive that many problems have no solution, that certain pains are inevitable, and that life, in the end, is a constant struggle against entropy. This explains why brilliant individuals frequently suffer from existential crises. They try to find meaning in a universe that offers no guarantees, and that search can be exhausting. The brilliant mind wants answers, but the world responds with silence. So, what would be the solution? Schopenhauer suggested that instead of seeking happiness through the intellect, the intelligent should learn to cultivate a state of acceptance and detachment. But how could that be possible? The illusion of rational happiness, the error of the intelligent. If intelligence does not automatically lead to happiness, why do so many people believe the opposite? The error of the intelligent, according to Schopenhauer, lies in presuming that logical thought can solve all the dilemmas of existence. They analyze, question, seek patterns, and try to find a rational method to achieve happiness. But happiness does not follow a mathematical equation. It cannot be predicted, controlled, or guaranteed by any philosophical theory. Think about how a highly intelligent individual approaches their emotions. They try to understand them, categorize them, decipher their causes. They want to know why they are sad, how to avoid that sadness in the future, and what to do to maintain a constant state of satisfaction. But this approach, ironically, can drive them even further away from happiness. This is because, in Schopenhauer's view, happiness is not a problem to be solved, but a state to be experienced, and the obsession with deciphering it can prevent it from occurring naturally. Another aspect of this illusion is the idea that knowledge will lead to better choices and, consequently, a more satisfying life. But what happens in reality? Often, the most intelligent people suffer precisely because they know too much. They see every flaw in relationships, every trap in the professional world, every irony and injustice in life. While an ordinary individual may embark on a new project with naive optimism, the intelligent person might hesitate, foreseeing every possible obstacle and failure before even trying. The result? Paralysis, doubt, and a sense of disconnection from those who live more impulsively and spontaneously. Schopenhauer also noticed that the intelligent frequently fall into the trap of overthinking. Instead of simply enjoying a moment of pleasure, a good meal, a meeting with friends, a stroll outdoors, they analyze and question. Am I truly happy right now? Is this pleasure genuine or merely fleeting? How can I replicate this feeling in the future? This level of introspection can prevent them from fully living in the present. The great error of the intelligent, then, is believing that their mind can protect them from suffering solely through knowledge. They try to build walls against pain, avoid mistakes, and plan every step of life with precision. But life is uncontrollable, and the attempt to master it intellectually only generates more frustration. Schopenhauer suggested that instead of seeking a rational solution for happiness, the intelligent should learn to accept the unpredictability of life and, to some extent, surrender to the raw experience of existence. But how can one find peace amid this mental storm? The answer lies in one of the darkest aspects of intelligence: the inevitable loneliness it can bring, the price of awareness, the solitary fate of the genius. One of the cruelest consequences of intelligence is loneliness. The more you understand about the world, the harder it becomes to find people who share the same vision. Schopenhauer believed that exceptionally intelligent individuals tend to live in a state of isolation, not because they choose to, but because their way of seeing life distances them from others. Ordinary people find connection in small conversations, fleeting passions, superficial interests. But a brilliant individual often feels that these interactions are empty, artificial, or predictable. They long for depth, for meaningful discussions, for people who see beyond appearances, but such encounters are rare. This isolation can manifest in several ways. The genius may feel out of place within their own family, unable to share their ideas and concerns. They may have difficulty forming romantic bonds, as they perceive the limitations of interactions based solely on desire or convenience. They might even withdraw from society as a whole, preferring the company of books and thoughts over mundane conversations. But this loneliness is not only social, it is also existential. Those who see beyond the world's illusions feel a weight that others do not. The awareness that life is fleeting, that suffering is inevitable, and that meaning is often subjective, can lead to a deep sense of metaphysical isolation. However, Schopenhauer did not view this isolation as an absolute condemnation. On the contrary, he believed that solitude could be a form of freedom. The one who learns to be with themselves without needing the validation of others discovers a rare autonomy. Instead of seeking external distractions, they can immerse themselves in the world of art, philosophy, and contemplation. For Schopenhauer, this was the key to transforming loneliness into something productive and, paradoxically, even satisfying. But is there a concrete way to alleviate this burden? Is there a path to peace amid the turbulence of consciousness? Schopenhauer believed there is, and the answer lay in the way we choose to direct our minds. Is there a path to peace? Schopenhauer answers, if intelligence condemns us to restlessness, how can we find relief? Schopenhauer argued that the key to this mental peace lies in acceptance and detachment. He did not believe it was possible to completely escape suffering, but rather to reduce its impact by learning to live with greater tranquility and less resistance to the natural flow of life. The first step, according to him, is to accept that suffering is inevitable. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain at all costs, fleeing from negative feelings, seeking distractions, deluding themselves with promises of eternal happiness. But for Schopenhauer, this escape is futile. Life contains suffering because that is its nature. The sooner we understand this, the less time we waste fighting the inevitable. The second step is to cultivate a state of mental quietude. Schopenhauer suggested that intelligence, when uncontrolled, acts like an overactive engine that never stops. To find peace, it is necessary to learn to slow down, to create moments of internal silence. He advocated practices such as contemplation, meditation, and even the appreciation of art as ways to quiet the mind. Furthermore, he saw detachment as an essential remedy for the restlessness of the intelligent. Many suffer because they cling to impossible desires, unattainable ambitions, illusions of control over the future. But the secret, according to Schopenhauer, is to learn to let go, to abandon the need for everything to turn out exactly as we want. Finally, Schopenhauer believed that one of the most effective paths to inner peace was found in art. He viewed the aesthetic experience as a form of transcendence, a moment when we can forget ourselves and simply lose ourselves in the beauty of the world. But how exactly does that work? The key to inner freedom. If intelligence traps us in an amplified perception of pain, is there any form of relief? For Schopenhauer, yes. And the answer lay in art. Unlike logic, which often amplifies our suffering by making us overanalyze, art offers a moment of surrender, where thought dissolves and only the experience remains. According to Schopenhauer, art is one of the few ways to temporarily escape the cycle of desires and dissatisfactions that governs our existence. When we contemplate a painting, listen to music that touches us, or lose ourselves in a great literary work, we experience something rare, a state of transcendence where the mind quiets and suffering momentarily disappears. Among all forms of art, Schopenhauer considered music the most powerful. He saw it as a direct expression of the very essence of existence, a universal language that speaks directly to the soul without needing to pass through the filter of the intellect. Think of a melody that has deeply moved you. In that moment, you weren't analyzing every note or trying to rationally understand the composition. You simply felt. This state of artistic contemplation, for Schopenhauer, is a kind of suspension of the will, a rare instant in which we step away from the incessant pursuit of more and simply exist. It is a pause in the inherent suffering of life, a connection with something beyond logic and mundane concerns. But art is not only a refuge, it can also be a guide. Great works help us to see profound aspects of existence, offering new perspectives on the human condition. Through art, we can find not only relief, but also wisdom. However, Schopenhauer knew that art alone was not enough. To achieve a more lasting state of peace, one must go even deeper, and that requires a radical transformation in the way we perceive ourselves. How to live with intelligence without suffering. If intelligence amplifies suffering, and art offers only temporary relief, is there a definitive solution? Schopenhauer believed that there is, and it lies in the renunciation of the ego itself. The great cause of human dissatisfaction, according to him, is the incessant pursuit of control, recognition, and meaning. The mind craves answers, certainty, and the feeling of mastering one's own existence. But the truth is that we will never have that control. Life is unpredictable, the world is chaotic, and suffering is inevitable. The only way out is to abandon this illusion of power over destiny. Schopenhauer found this idea in Eastern thought, especially in Buddhism, which profoundly influenced his philosophy. He realized that those who could free themselves from the obsession with the self, their own desires, ambitions, and fears, were the ones who achieved a more serene and harmonious state of being. But how does this apply in practice? Does it mean we must abandon our dreams, withdraw from society, and live like monks? Not necessarily. What Schopenhauer proposed was an inner detachment, a state in which one learns to observe one's own thoughts and desires without completely identifying with them. Imagine that your mind is like a river. Most people are constantly fighting against the current, trying to force life to follow a specific path. But those who find peace learn to float, to accept the natural flow of events without resistance. This does not mean passivity or resignation, but rather a new way of living, with less anxiety, less frustration, and less self-imposed suffering. Instead of desperately seeking happiness through reason, logic, or achievement, Schopenhauer suggested something surprisingly simple. Learn to be present. accept what cannot be changed, and find beauty in the small moments of existence. This does not mean rejecting intelligence, but rather using it wisely, not to control life, but to understand it with more clarity and lightness. In the end, intelligence is not an inevitable burden. It only becomes a curse when we use it against ourselves. When we learn to accept reality as it is, without illusions or resistance, we discover that true freedom does not come from absolute knowledge, but from the ability to live without fear of the unknown.